Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Today, my guest is Alastair Wood, who is the Vice President and General Counsel at Rhino, and he was the former Chief of Staff to the General Counsel and Chief Administrative Officer at City Legal, amongst a bunch of other cool positions. Alastair, how's it going today?
It's going fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
It's my pleasure. I gave a little glimpse of your bio, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, what keeps you busy, a bit of your experience, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I started out in a very traditional way. I worked at big New York City law firms and represented, huge multinational clients. From there, I eventually moved to Citigroup, which was one of our biggest clients at the law firms. And I was fortunate enough to get an incredibly cool job as Chief of Staff to General Counsel and Chief Administrative Officer of what at the time was a 1,600 person legal department. We were basically one of the world's largest law firms inside one of the world's largest multinational corporations. And it was one of those roles where every single day you can honestly go home and say you learned something. Super entertaining, super cool, and super challenging. The fun part about that role is when it comes to an end, you're kind of left with a blank slate of what do you do next. So having spent my entire career at large organizations, I naturally decided to go in the entire opposite direction and join a startup as the fourth employee of a very early stage startup, focusing on the retirement space as their general counsel and chief compliance officer, and had the unique experience and challenge and struggle of building a company from the ground up. Whether it was hiring, building our product, trying to understand what the market wanted. And that was another phenomenal experience that really excited me about the startup space in a way that I never probably truly expected. And it led me to my current role at Rhino, where I had the privilege to become their first general counsel. Joined in the pandemic, which is a unique experience unto itself, and have been there since 2020. Really. Loving the journey as we grow and really scale our platform incredibly over the last 3 years. I think the phenomenal part about all of those experiences is, while they are all somewhat different and disjointed, they all build and lead to the place where you end up today, where you're able to bring all of those experiences, to your current role. And hopefully have a little fun while you're doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let me try to combine two paths, as you had highlighted, all of this experience that you have, it builds your CV, your body of knowledge, your experience. So you've got these two startups or smaller organizations that you've worked with. Meanwhile, you're the chief of staff at one of the largest law firms inside one of the largest multinationals. So what were some of those key learnings as a chief of staff, which many organizations, if they're SMEs, typically don't have? But what were the key learnings as chief of staff that you tried to bring into these organizations to help them, get their success faster, be more organized, or anything else that you think would be valuable for any organization to have and know?
I think the biggest learning I had was really building buy-in. At a law firm, they're very hierarchical. I could tell you what to do because I was a senior associate, and the partner could tell me what to do because he was the partner. As chief of staff, you were interacting with people who were incredibly powerful and incredibly important, that you somehow had to get to buy in to whatever you were needing to do. And they didn't report to you, and they didn't have to listen to you. So you had to develop a skill set that, quite frankly, I don't think I had when I got there, of how do I get people to want to be on my team and pulling in the same direction for this project and feeling ownership and buy-in and really the desire to make it succeed when they don't have the mandatory requirement. I think when you bring that to, that skill to the startup world, where it becomes important is, really, making sure that everyone is pulling in the same direction, that everyone feels invested, that you're not just telling people you have to do this because I'm telling you to do it as a senior member of the company. You are getting people invested in your success and their success and making it our success. That was not something that I think came naturally, coming out of kind of a very corporate type of world. But I think when I look back, that skill set was the most important thing I left Citigroup with. And I'm incredibly appreciative that I learned it before coming to a world where there isn't hierarchy, quite frankly.
So what I'm pausing to reflect on is the parallels between a chief of staff, whose job is it to get people to be bought in where they don't have to, and then your other life as a counsel, and your job is to give people guidance such that they listen to you. Sometimes, I mean, really, they don't ever have to, per se, because it's counsel, not requirement. And we can debate that if you want. But then I also find, my assertion around like your ability to communicate effectively as a lawyer is critical, because there is interpretation of the law and then there is the law. So I would only imagine that your ability to be an effective and persuasive communicator in writing and verbally gave you a unique skill set to be able to do that, such that your messages were interpreted as intended, and that probably helped you be a good chief of staff. Is that fair to say, or how do you approach that?
I think that's incredibly fair to say. I mean, I started out my career as a litigator, and that is a world in which you are attempting to write persuasively and attempting to convince people of the correctness of your position. That skill, or I hope skill that I have, is one that I think allows you to avoid confusion, quite frankly. I think that's where it often breaks down is, people write, sometimes I included, write too quickly, write without thinking through all the ways people interpret things. And as a senior leader, when you send out those messages, you can send mixed signals. People can take it wrong, incorrectly, not even internally, externally as well. And I think one of the things that I have been fortunate to benefit from is that exercise for the first 10 years of my career, of having to make sure that what you wrote down was exactly what you meant, is something that I hope has led to my ability to make sure that people understand what we're trying to accomplish, and doing it carefully. And it's something that I found outside of the legal world. I find people often come to me to say, hey, we've got an email we're writing to customers. Can you take a minute to edit it? And it's not because I have some sort of like special understanding of what the customer wants. It's more that I've spent a lifetime trying to communicate ideas and trying to be persuasive in communicating those ideas. And hopefully I can do that in the email that the customer gets to explain why we're doing X or Y or Z. And that is something that I am incredibly proud of. Quite frankly, that people come to me when they don't have a legal problem for help. I view that as if you're going to your lawyer because you think they can help you and you don't have a problem, that's a positive sign. That's if you're, as I always say, we don't want to be the department of no. We don't want to be the people you call when you're in trouble. We want to actually be viewed as value add. That's always the goal. Yeah. So it's that ability to communicate becomes crucial.
Absolutely. And I think what and listeners, before you go and run out and hire a bunch of lawyers to work in your communications department or what have you, I think it's a good lesson to remember that everybody, and you said it, Alastair, is like, you've spent your life doing this. It is your craft. Like, you do not need the letters JD behind your name to show you have a craft that you've worked on. Where you talk to engineers who've gone to engineering school and they approach things with an engineer mind, that is their set of tools, that is their skill set, that is the craft that they've honed over time. And I think great leaders have the ability to identify what people's unique skills are. And I think we had Mark Hirschberg, who's he said, hey, you have this like depth of skills, but when you add breadth to that set of skills, that's when you become really, really powerful. Because for you, Alastair, you've taken your communication, legal, persuasiveness, ability for people to understand it, and you've applied it across this, broad-ish level of tasks and responsibilities that for an organization, any organization, can be really valuable and beneficial. So I guess my invitation to our listeners is saying, hey, find those superpowers in your team, find the superpowers that you need. And they're not always as obvious as the skills that Alastair, has because they're written in his name, but they're applicable across the organization. Why did you join this new company? Why did they want to bring you on from your perspective? And how do you see yourself contributing to that next vision?
Well, I guess let me take that in reverse. The reason I joined the company, really came down to people. I mean, there are a lot of great companies out there. There are a lot of great ideas. Obviously, I think, Rhino is a company that is really revolutionizing the digital deposit space. And, we've seen incredible growth, incredible adoption, all of those wonderful like metrics that get excited about when you talk about a company. But there are a lot of companies that claim all of those metrics. What excited me about Rhino was the people. Quite frankly, I think when you join a company, you want to be excited and inspired by the people you work with. And I don't just mean the people above you or beside you, but the entirety of the company. You want to work with, junior engineers who are excited about what they're doing. You want to work with, a senior managers who are excited about what they're doing. And I think that culture was one that I found very attractive because, quite frankly, this is hard. Being a startup and building a company is not easy. And you need people who want to be there, are excited about being there, are inspiring to you and inspire others. Those traits are something that I think you can't discount when you're simply looking at, what is the customer acquisition cost or what is the revenue? Obviously important metrics, one and all, but I think what gets you from wherever you are today to wherever you're going to be tomorrow is really, do you have the team that can get you there?
Yeah,
absolutely. And Rhino had that in spades for me.
Cool. Well, it sounds like a cool company. I'm excited to follow it on LinkedIn and check out what they're doing because it looks like it's a cool mission. As we finish up, if we look back at your career and we look at like an area where you learned a lot, and usually I find that people learn through the challenging times, right? It's that stuff that really tests them, that allows them to step back and say, okay, I got my butt kicked and here I am. What was something that really stuck with you in terms of your career, a lesson you learned the hard way, something that has really been formative in terms of how you work with teams, work with people?
I think the biggest lesson I learned, I probably didn't recognize it at the time, but when I was younger, I had a very short-term view of the world, meaning you took the next job because it paid $100 more, or it was a slightly better firm, or whatever. And that was really the wrong way to go about it. It should have been, where do I want to be in 10 years? and what are the skills I need to put into my toolkit to get there. You know, my example is I did not pursue jobs that might have been slightly less pay for a few years, but would have been outsized in building your CV for the next job. Meaning whether it's going to work at the DOJ or the SEC, or going to work at on some particular case that may not have been immediately value accretive, but when you looked at the tools you were putting into your toolkit, were building a much bigger skill set that you had. And I think it's when you're in your 40s, it's very easy to say like 2 or 3 years doesn't really matter. When you're in your 20s or 30s, it feels that like that's a lifetime. So I understand that's hard to sometimes internalize, but really thinking about where do I want to be, what are the skills that I need to have, and how do I get them so that when I get offered that chance to say, you're going to be general counsel of this awesome company, what are they looking for that I can make sure I check all those boxes? It's easy to say in retrospect. It's really hard to do when you're in the moment. I'm sure I'm probably still failing at it and recognizing the opportunities I'm either taking or passing up. But I just encourage people to not be short term, but be thinking about themselves as a long-term investment, not a short-term investment.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, I mean, we are the strategic planning people. And so if you don't know where you're going, how will you ever get there? And one thing to challenge, your, as the listeners, thinking is that in front of you are infinite possibilities. There's no shortage of possibilities, overwhelmingly so. And a good tool to be able to filter those out is, to Alastair's point, is figure out where you want to go and only take the options that get you. They're still get you there. There's still going to be hundreds or thousands or millions, but there are fewer. And if anything, it'll help you provide a heuristic to make those decisions. And of course, if you apply that to organizational strategic planning, help your team there. But Alastair, I think you made the right choices, or you made the choices. I don't know if they're right. You made the choices you made, you got what you got. And it sounds like you've been able to make a big contribution to people. So, and a contribution to our listeners today. So where can people learn more about you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about Rhino?
Well, obviously LinkedIn is where I think everyone learns about everyone else these days. Rhino, our website is sayrhino.com. We also have a presence on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of the various social media platforms. But really, the place to learn about us is if you're renting an apartment, ask if Rhino is an option, and if it is, please check us out.
Awesome. And don't confuse that with bringing a real Rhino into your apartment. You'll probably have less luck, especially if you're in New York, but what do I know? So Alastair, thank you for being here. I appreciate you sharing today, and it's been real fun chatting with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. Folks, my guest today has been Alastair Wood. He's the Vice President and General Counsel at Rhino. One of the things I think about and I'm left with today is looking at the skills that you have and how do they contribute to your future organizations, being strategic about your skill development and looking at your entire body of work to bring that in, but also recognizing that your skill set is complementary to a set of the team members that you have around you. So make sure you build the right team to be able to move forward that right mission. And it sounds like they're doing some cool stuff like that at Rhino. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you subscribing. Appreciate you following along and doing all those cool things. And be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn or wherever else you might be. My name is Anthony Taylor. This has been the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Appreciate you again. I'll see you next time.